They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but in Durango back in 1914, I learned that some souls drip through brushes, and when they drip, it's blood that comes out. I saw him, with my own eyes. He painted in silence, with gestures almost like prayer, hands stained with sin, trembling like confession. The paint was thick, dark. It had a metallic scent that made my stomach turn. It wasn't mercury red, not oil. It was too warm. At first I thought it was a macabre performance, a trick of the light, a metaphor, but no, it was blood. Durango was at war, not just the war of men and rifles, a quieter war, older and far more intimate, the war between the sacred and the profane. And it was there, among crumbling walls and moonless nights, that a man began to paint as if pulling each canvas from inside his own body. Or someone else, S. No one knew his real name. They called him the Flesh Painter. And what still haunts me isn't what he painted, but what his paintings seemed to know about the people who looked at them. That's why I came back. To remember or to forget. In that year, Durango felt like a city forgotten by God and remembered only by ghosts. The Mexican Revolution was tearing the country apart. Soldiers outnumbered common men in the streets. Children learned to tell the difference between mortar blasts like they learned to spell their names. But what chilled me wasn't the noise of war. It was the silence between the shots, as if the city only dared breathe between moments of pain. There was something far too ancient in the dry air, like the dust carried centuries of buried memory. At night, windows closed before the sun even touched the horizon. Candles were lit early, not to illuminate, but to repel. They said shadows moved through the alleys and crosses burned against the chest without reason. Some blamed the climate, others the insurgents. But the elders, they whispered, low and fearful. They spoke of an older hunger, one that wasn't fed by bread or by flesh alone. The old house where it all began still stood when I first arrived, dark, hunched, hidden between moss-covered adobe walls. It seemed to breathe. I swear I felt it. A wet sigh escaping the cracks of old wood, like time had paused there just to observe. The air reeked of rust, even though there were no nails, and on the outer walls, marks, not graffiti, finger-made, dirty fingers, maybe wet, maybe soaked. At the Sunday market I heard whispers of the painter. That man on Soul Street, they murmured. The house even dogs avoid. But no one ever said his name. There was a dark respect around him, as if naming him might wake something up. Merchants changed the subject quickly, and when someone mentioned his work, eyes averted, as if just imagining the paintings could drive a person mad. And maybe it could. It was Father Antonio who finally spoke more clearly, a stern man, hands like stone, eyes like someone who hadn't slept in years. He said they'd tried to drive him out. Prayers, blessings, incense and salt. Nothing worked. The man laughed, not in mockery, but with pity, as if he knew they understood nothing. He paints what's already here, the priest said, pressing a hand to his chest. Here, and deeper. It froze me and pulled me in. I had to see. I stayed at a widow's home, Doña Clara. She didn't ask much, just served strong coffee and warned, don't come home late. One night I asked if she knew the painter. She just looked out the window and said, he knows you. That sentence stuck to me like cold sweat. How could he know me? I had just arrived. But in that place, it felt like the town already knew who you were, before you ever opened your mouth. The wind was the most frequent sound at night, but not ordinary wind. It sounded like moaning, like houses whispering to one another. Some nights I heard more, scratching, a rhythmic tapping like a brush on canvas. 3 knocks, pause, 4 knocks, pause, then again. I looked out the window, saw only blackness, and smelled the blood, not strong, not fresh, but present. Like an old memory of a wound that never healed. Durango was like an unfinished painting, beautiful and horrifying. The mountains in the distance seemed to watch. Church bells rang at odd hours, and someone was always crying, even if it was inside their own mind. It was hard to tell what was real from what was a reflection, because in that town, even mirrors seemed to lie, and shadows had names. One of them was his, the thickest shadow of all. Children avoided his street. They threw stones from a distance, crossed their fingers while passing. Some spoke of figures in the windows. Others swore they saw paintings moving behind the curtains. The local police claimed there were no reports, no formal crimes, but the officers avoided the street too. He's mad, not a criminal, they'd say. But the whole town knew. There was something criminally unnatural about what he did, and no one wanted to provoke it. In the last week of that month, I saw him for the first time. Tall, thin, wrapped in a black coat, even under October's brutal heat. He carried something wrapped in linen, walked slowly like floating, and for a second, as he passed me, he stopped, turned, looked. His eyes had no white, or maybe they did, but were lost in that thick red. They seemed empty. He smiled. And in that instant, I swear, I felt like I was already inside one of his paintings. No one really knew where he came from. Some said he was born nearby, the son of a mute midwife and a missing soldier. Others claimed he fled from a burnt asylum down south. I searched for records, dug through churches, baptism books, city archives. No name, no certificate. It was as if he had grown from the earth, a forgotten root. People called him only Mateo, or in whispers, El Pintor de la Sangre, the painter of blood. Mateo walked rarely, always at the same hour, when the cathedral's shadow touched the cobbles of Soul Street. He wore black, like mourning was his natural state. His face was hard to describe. Not ugly, not handsome, but disturbing, as if he carried every expression at once, or none. Sunken eyes, sharp nose, skin dull, almost grey, and always his hands stained. With paint, they said, but we knew it wasn't just that. I only saw the inside of his house once. One afternoon, he unexpectedly invited me in. He said nothing, just opened the door and gestured. I stepped in like crossing a sacred threshold. The smell was the same I'd sensed outside. Iron, mold, and something sweet, rotten, impossible to name. The walls were covered in white cloths. Each one hid a painting. "You want to see?" he finally asked. His voice low, flat, just a vibration, like an old chair creaking. I lifted one of the cloths, a portrait, but not of anyone I knew. The figure looked in transition, a face split between laughter and agony. The skin was red, not from light but from layers, blood, clearly, and more than that, it pulsed. I swear, I saw the edges tremble as if alive. I stepped back, trembling. Mateo just watched, not proud, not vain, something between guilt and surrender. "They want out," he said, "but it's not time yet." I watched his habits. He didn't eat outside, didn't speak to neighbors. Only bought 3 things: candles, alcohol, and canvas. Sometimes linen cloths, never went to mass, but he wore a small iron cross on his belt, like he knew he had to protect himself from himself. Some said he spoke alone, others claimed he talked to the paintings. One night I saw his light on until dawn, and I heard, behind the glass, 2 voices, but he lived alone. The town's chief inspector, a skeptical, stern man, once tried to question him, just as a precaution, public pressure. He came back pale, never spoke of it again, and a few days later, he retired. "That man isn't insane," he reportedly told the priest. "He's too sane." That phrase haunts me. How can someone be too sane? What does it mean to go beyond sanity? Maybe it means seeing what others can't, or worse, accepting what others won't. Mateo also wrote journals, notes, scraps of thought. I found some later, hidden behind old frames. The handwriting was steady, but strained, as if he fought against his own hand. He wrote of dreams with lidless eyes, of doors that led nowhere, of voices that taught him the color of pain. His mind seemed caught between 2 worlds, the visible and the unspeakable, and the paint he used was the bridge. He said he painted what he saw when he closed his eyes, but some paintings showed the faces of people who died days later. I recognized a woman in one piece. 3 days later, she was found in the school's dry well. How did he know? Coincidence, prophecy, or cause? The town began to avoid him, but also fear him, and more than that, respect him. Deep down, no one wanted to be painted next. He never sought fame, never sold a piece. Some tried to steal, but the thieves vanished. One disappeared on the road back. Another was found mute, staring into nothing, fingers stained with paint, mouth sewn shut with red thread. The paintings always returned to his house. No one knew how, as if they refused to be away from him, or worse, as if they owned the house. Was he an artist? Yes, but not like others. He didn't paint for beauty or for the world. He painted to heal or to expel. Maybe he was just trying to survive something that lived inside him, or worse, something he let out. I still don't know. But when I remember Mateo's face, I don't see madness. I see too much clarity, eyes so deep they seem to look inside out. And maybe that's more terrifying than insanity. The first painting to stir unrest appeared on a foggy morning, hanging like a warning on Mateo's house. It was a portrait of a man no one knew, or perhaps of every man. The face was blurred, like mist and flesh merged. But the most disturbing part was the color, a dark red, nearly black, that gleamed in the gray light. Someone tried to touch it. The texture was rough, warm, almost alive. That's when they noticed the smell, not paint, but blood. Rumors spread like a plague. He paints with blood, they said. But whose blood, they asked. Some believed it was his own, that he cut himself to paint. Others swore they heard screams at night. A priest approached the painting and fainted. He said he felt a presence, like the soul of the subject was still trapped inside. Since then, no one dared touch it. The painting stayed up for days, then it vanished. No sound, no witnesses. Mateo never denied it, nor did he confirm. He simply kept painting. Sometimes he left the canvases exposed on his porch. They seemed to change over time. What was a face one night became a skull the next. A laughing man turned into a broken corpse. Some tried to photograph them, but in the pictures the paintings were blurred, like they refused to be captured, as if the pain within them lived only through human eyes. One afternoon I asked him directly, "Do you paint with blood?" He stared at me for too long, then said, "Yes, but not just mine." I swallowed hard. "Whose is it?" Mateo turned, pointed toward the city and murmured, "They give it, even without knowing." I couldn't sleep that night. The phrase echoed like a cursed spell. Who were they? And what exactly were they giving? People began to disappear, quietly. A candle seller, an orphan boy, a woman who lived alone. Nothing that made the papers. But the rumors grew, and so did the paintings. With each disappearance, a new piece appeared. Those who saw them claimed to recognize features, a detail in the eye, a ring on a finger, a shade of skin. It was as if he was preserving the missing or consuming them. A local doctor, respected and skeptical, decided to investigate. He took a small sample from one exposed painting, sent it to the capital. Weeks later, the report arrived. Human blood, multiple types, with traces of natural anticoagulants. As if someone prepared the blood to last, said the report. The news never reached the town. It was silenced. The doctor left the city without a word. His painting rituals always happened at night. Mateo waited for the new moon, lit candles, arranged his canvases in a crescent. Those who spied saw only flickers of light and shifting shadows, but every single one who watched fell ill. One lost his voice, another his peripheral vision. Some said it wasn't just blood on the canvas, but pain, fear, despair distilled into color. Watching the creation was like tasting poison through your eyes. One night I woke up soaked in sweat, a heavy dream. I walked down a hallway of paintings. They all looked at me, they all bled. At the end, Mateo painted, his back turned. When I approached, he turned, and his face was mine. I woke up screaming. At dawn, I went to his house. The door was ajar. Inside, on the main easel, was a new painting. Exactly what I saw, my face bleeding, and beside it written in paint or blood, "Now you are part of it too." That's when I began to understand. The paintings weren't just art, they were seals, locks, cages, or portals. Each canvas was a kind of prison, or an attempt to contain what he saw, what he heard, or what possessed him. The blood was just the medium, the ink of the soul, the bridge between worlds. And Matteo, more than a painter, was a jailer or a servant, but of whom, in time, the paintings gained infamy. Outsiders came, despite the fear. Some fainted, others laughed uncontrollably, some left crying. One foreign writer said each painting whispered secrets far older than humanity. He claimed one of the pieces made him remember things he'd never lived, a war that doesn't exist, a place where the dead sing. He doesn't paint with blood, he said. He paints with the memory of what came before blood. At first it was all whispers, a comment at the butcher shop, a sideways glance during Mass. People spoke of Matteo like they spoke of old fevers, with respect, distance, and inevitable fear. But his art began attracting outsiders, journalists, art students, the occasional arrogant collector. Everyone wanted to see the paintings. Few came back, and those who did returned silent or shaken. One man didn't speak for 3 days. Another tore the eyes from a portrait of his wife, claiming she was inside it. The first authorities to intervene were city inspectors. They cited unhealthy practices and tried to enter Matteo's house. No one knows exactly what they saw inside, only that they left pale, trembling, and never spoke of it again. One resigned that same month. Another was found weeks later, completely silent, drawing faces on the walls of his own home. When asked what he was drawing, he'd say, "They're coming, one by one." The mayor, a proud man and classic politician, tried to capitalize on Matteo's strange fame. He installed a tourist sign outside Soul Street, branding it the Corridor of Occult Art. Matteo tore it down with his own hands. The next day, the mayor's office was invaded by rats, thousands, no explanation. The infestation lasted 3 days. After that, the sign was never replaced, and the street returned to its original name, Souls Street. No adjectives. The church moved more carefully. Father Antonio organized 3 specific masses to purify the city. With each one, Christ's image seemed darker, like an invisible soot coated it. During the 3rd Mass, the censer caught fire by itself. A scream echoed, not human, deep, guttural, from the ceiling itself. Many claimed to see a shadow cross the altar. Since then, the priest never mentioned Matteo's name in any sermon. Elderly women used to folk rituals began placing coarse salt at their doors. Rue branches, broken eggs on thresholds, red chilies under windows. Some tried to burn a painting left in the plaza. As the flames rose, the wind changed, blowing the fire toward them. 2 suffered burns. The painting, untouched, was taken back by someone. No one saw who. The next day, the old women whispered, "He has permission, but he's not from here." Children, on the other hand, saw Matteo as something between a monster and a magician. Some said he spoke to cats. Others claimed he drew in blood, and the drawings vanished. One girl said Matteo smiled and had a gold tooth. Another that he blinked with 3 eyes. Maybe imagination, or maybe children were the only ones pure enough to see what adults refused to. They didn't just feel fear, they felt called. Local artists were divided. Some hated him in silence, claiming he stained art with madness. Others tried to imitate him, using pig's blood, ox blood, mixed with oil. None succeeded. The colors didn't breathe. The paintings had no presence. One burned his entire exhibit in frustration. Another isolated himself, trying to dream like Matteo. He went mad, drew his own death before disappearing. Over time, an unspoken protocol emerged. No one approached his house after sunset. Candles were left on the sidewalk. If Mateo needed something, someone would deliver it silently, and sometimes he'd leave a canvas in return. Those who received them never spoke, just hung them behind thick curtains. It became a silent pact, a wordless contract. Mateo was no longer a man. He was an element of the city, like the wind, like the dead. Pressed by families of the missing, police opened an investigation. They searched rivers, alleys, cemeteries, but never Mateo's house. The excuse was lack of warrant. Everyone knew it was fear, cold, heavy fear. Some officers requested transfers, others disappeared under odd circumstances. Even those who stayed avoided Soul Street. Radios stopped working there, horses froze, and their own footsteps felt heavier. Silence became official. No more news articles about the painter. Priests prayed without names. Officials pretended he didn't exist. But he was there, always, painting, watching. His canvases kept appearing around the city. Some vanished as quickly as they came. Others became legend. And the most terrifying part wasn't the blood. It was that slowly the entire town seemed to accept him. As if, deep down, they knew. He was painting what had always been there. Mateo never explained, never gave interviews or speeches, but his art spoke, and the blood, it spoke louder than words. It wasn't just paint, it was coagulated time, it was confession, a witness. In every canvas, the blood didn't feel dead. It was active, as if it still vibrated with the emotion that spilled it. A red that shifted with the light, that looked wet even when dry. It wasn't technique, it was a pact, an obsession, or maybe an ancient language, spoken in pain. In scattered notebooks he wrote in fragments, "Blood is memory in liquid state. The body tries to hide, but blood tells. Painting with blood is like screaming inward, each line a key, a sliver of meaning." To Mateo, blood wasn't just a symbol, it was origin, it was source. His art wasn't about beauty nor protest, it was ritual, a way to make the invisible visible, to give shape to what lurks behind closed eyes. I studied the colors, compared pigments. No red, however rich, matched the density he used. It wasn't just hue, it was presence. Something in the texture, the depth, made the color feel aware, as if it remembered, and maybe it did. After all, blood carries everything. Genetics, illness, trauma. Maybe on those canvases the blood was still alive, still whispering, "I was someone." In some pieces the blood dripped past the frame, as if trying to escape. Other times it dried into indecipherable shapes. Letters, sigils, maps. No one knew, but the pattern repeated like a secret language written in flesh. Occult scholars tried to decode it. One said the shapes resembled ancient seals used to summon or bind entities. Another believed they were confessions, names of those who gave blood. Neither of them returned to the city. The paintings weren't random. There was order, a cycle, like spiritual seasons of suffering. First, birth, a confused face wrapped in red mist. Then pain, eyes too open, mouths in silent scream. Then surrender, figures bowed, arms wide. Finally, forgetting, eyeless faces, featureless bodies. It was a circular story told in flesh, time, and lament. A liturgy, painted in blood. Mateo seemed to live for it. No joy, no sorrow, only focus, silence. On the days he painted, his skin paled, his eyes sank. It was as if he was drained with every canvas, as if he was sacrificing himself piece by piece. Some said he was dying slowly. Others believed the opposite, that he was becoming something new, something the blood was reshaping from the inside. In one specific note, he wrote, "Blood knows the way back." That phrase haunted me for months. What did back mean? Back from where, or to where? Maybe each painting was an attempt to open a door, not to escape, but to let something return. And the blood was the key, as if it awakened memories older than life, something ancestral, as if blood had a will, a voice. Tibetan monks create mandalas with sand, art to meditate on, then destroy. Mateo did the opposite, art to remember, to preserve. But what was he preserving, or imprisoning? Maybe they were memories that weren't his, maybe inherited pain or forgotten beings. Blood was the bridge, the offering, the mirror. He didn't paint with blood for shock. It was need. It was survival. When I tried to touch one of the pieces, my hand burned. Not fire, fever. As if the canvas recognized me, I pulled away fast. But ever since, I dreamed of red rivers, of veins carved into walls, of words written in flesh. As if by touching the blood, something touched me back, and I understood. This wasn't just art. It was a link, a bond, a contagion. I don't know if he chose the blood or if it chose him. Maybe there was a will in it, a call only he could hear. But one thing I know, to Matteo, blood was everything. Ink, verb, witness and sentence. The only material worthy of painting what he saw, and maybe the only thing capable of containing it, because what he painted didn't belong to the world of the living. Ever since rumors began that Matteo painted with human blood, the town's most feared and obvious question lingered. Where did the blood come from? Skeptics claimed it was all a performance, that he bought animal blood from the slaughterhouse and altered it. But just one look at the canvases cast doubt. The smell, the thickness, the presence. It wasn't from a cow. It was blood that knew, that remembered. And some said that listened. Some believed Matteo used his own blood, that it was artistic self-flagellation. It seemed plausible until someone noticed the volume of blood in his work increased, but he never looked weak, never wounded, never pale enough, as if there was another source, or worse, a willing one. A neighbor swore he saw people entering his home at night, dark clothes, silent steps, but no one was ever seen leaving. One theory from the elders claimed the blood came from the dead, not murder victims, exhumations. He talks to those beneath the ground, said a farmer, and they deliver. According to this belief, Matteo visited cemeteries during new moons, dug with his hands, touched cold flesh, and somehow the blood, or what remained of it, rose again. Absurd. But in that town, not everything was easy to dismiss. Others spoke of a pact, a deal, that Matteo had exchanged something with what they called the voice behind the veil, an entity, a name too old to be spoken. In return for visions and the ability to paint the unseen, he'd receive the blood he needed from wherever, from whomever. And as long as he painted, he'd be protected. But if he stopped, refused, betrayed the agreement, the blood would come for him. This explained his silence, his discipline, his obedience. In one of his strangest journal entries, Matteo wrote, "They send me the matter, I only shape it, I am the clay of their will." The handwriting was different, firmer, as if another hand had written it, or as if he was in a trance. He spoke in plural, they. He never explained who they were, but elsewhere he scribbled something more disturbing. Blood does not come, it is called. It remembers the path, and it obeys. A forensic doctor from the capital became curious. She secretly obtained a dried flake from one of his frames, tested it in a lab. What she discovered shocked her. The sample had 3 distinct blood types, as if mixed. The cellular age varied, some fresh, some decades old. It was an impossible blood. The doctor disappeared weeks later before publishing her full report. To understand more, some turned to ancient witchcraft, healers, seers, mediums. A spiritualist said the blood came from the lower line, that there were portals beneath the city, and Matteo knew where they were. He collected what leaked from cracks in the spirit world. It wasn't human blood, it was Earth's memory of other times, other beings. This explanation caused panic in some, relief in others, but all agreed. Whatever the origin, it wasn't natural. An old church manuscript, hidden in a sacristy wall, spoke of something similar, a prophecy. When the nameless painter covers the walls in the ink of the ancients, the bones shall sing. It was a fragment from an obscure book, translated from Latin, never preached. But Father Antonio saw the pattern, the paintings, the blood, the silence. To him, Mateo wasn't an artist, he was a sign, a herald, the beginning or end of something no one would understand. A final rumor, whispered rarely, claimed the blood didn't come from outside, but from within the paintings, that they weren't painted in blood, but produced it, that he used normal paint and the images began to bleed on their own, like living flesh stretched on wood. Absurd, yes. But one collector swore he saw a drop fall from a canvas hours after hanging it. He wiped it. It returned for 3 nights. In the end, he burned the painting. Whatever the truth, one thing became certain. The blood in Mateo's art wasn't just a medium. It was origin, ending, and transition. And those who tried to uncover its source disappeared, went mad, or were silenced. Because perhaps the most dangerous thing wasn't painting with blood. It was knowing where it truly came from. It was a normal morning. Fog slipped slowly over rooftops. The church bells rang twice, off schedule. The milkman, walking down Soul Street, noticed something strange. Mateo's front door was open. No one had ever seen that. He approached cautiously. No knock. Inside, silence. No candles. No smell. Nothing. For the first time, the house felt empty. Completely. But one detail no one would forget. Every wall was covered in paintings. Turned to face the wall. The news spread like fever. Mateo was gone. No trace. No note. No cry. No neighbor saw or heard anything. The bed was made. Food untouched. Brushes cleaned. Everything frozen, like he'd stepped out for a walk and never returned. But what unsettled people wasn't the absence. It was what had been left behind. Every corner held something. Not scent, not sound, but a thick presence. A pressure in the air, like someone was still breathing there, from the other side. Police were called, but didn't enter immediately. 2 officers reached the door, looked inside, and backed away. One vomited. The other locked the door from the outside, like afraid it might come out. 3 days later, the chief allowed entry. Just 3 went in, a priest, a cop, a journalist. Only the priest returned speaking, and briefly, he's gone. But he didn't go alone. The journalist quit his career. The officer took his life a week later. Inside, over 50 paintings, all covered, all turned toward the wall. Some nailed in place with wire, like they wanted to escape. Others chained. In the center, an empty frame streaked with fresh blood. No body, no clue. But something there said, without words, he wasn't taken by force. He was called. The house was sealed, but no one dared demolish it. Some tried to buy it. Curious folk, millionaires, eccentric artists, all gave up after one visit. One European art dealer left saying, "Time doesn't pass in there, it accumulates." Another made an offer. His house burned down that night. Coincidence or message, no one tried again. Over time, the paintings began to vanish, one by one. No break-ins, no tracks, just gone. Some believed collectors were behind it. Others, that the paintings left on their own, that Mateo was calling them back, wherever he was. Only the empty frame remained, untouched, waiting. No dust settled on it, no cobwebs. It just existed, like a portal waiting to be used. His name faded, first from fear, then from respect, then reverence. He became a symbol of something no one could name. Not just a vanished painter, a living absence, a wound in the town's memory, and the most unsettling part, no one ever painted again on that street, as if to do so would be betrayal. Later accounts told of sightings, a tall man in black, moving between shadows, a silhouette standing before churches, schools, ruins. One child claimed to speak with him, that he asked, "Do you already dream in red?" A drifter said he saw Mateo in another city years later, with completely white eyes. Said he painted on dirt with his finger, and where he touched, plants withered. Mateo's legacy wasn't artistic. No museums, no exhibitions. His paintings couldn't be displayed. Some who tried, died. Others went mad. One family found a painting in their basement. No idea how it got there. They tried to hide it. Within a week, everyone bled from the eyes. They threw it in the river. It reappeared on their wall. In the end, they sealed the basement with concrete and placed a cross. We don't know where he is, or if he is, but it feels like Matteo never left, just changed places or form. Maybe he dissolved into his work. Maybe he stepped through the empty frame to the other side. What remains is not his absence. It's his memory, dense, warm, alive, like blood. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth. The painter vanished, but the paintings still call. In Durango, stories don't die. They're buried standing, and Matteo's, even without a body, was never laid to rest. The legends began quietly, whispers from old women who still remembered the scent of his paintings. But soon, they took shape, color, voice. Children sang rhymes about the man who painted souls. Drunks swore they saw paintings walking at night, and a phrase became common, almost a prayer. If the eyes follow you, don't look back. No one knew what it truly meant, but everyone obeyed. One of the oldest accounts came from a barber. As a boy, he saw one of Matteo's paintings covered with a thin sheet. He swore that even without seeing the image, he felt something behind it. A cold heat, a breath without a mouth. When a breeze lifted the cloth briefly, he saw eyes, human eyes, not painted, real, blinking slowly. Since then, he's never had a mirror in his barbershop. Cuts hair in silence, always with his back to the wall. Doña Adelia, a war widow, said one of the paintings just appeared on her porch, covered. When she lifted the cloth, her hand trembled. It was a portrait of her husband, dead for 10 years, but not how she remembered him. He was younger, in uniform, crying, but crying blood. She burned the painting in her backyard, but for 7 nights she dreamed of that same weeping. On the 8th, she woke up blind. Doctors never found a cause. A young musician traveled to Durango just to see the works. He bribed his way into Matteo's abandoned house. Didn't stay 10 minutes. Said the paintings changed as he approached. One of a seated woman turned into a smiling corpse. Another, a landscape, became a field of crosses. The worst was the last, a self-portrait of himself, seen from behind. And in the painting's background, something approaching, with Matteo's eyes. A philosophy professor wrote a small book called The Flesh of Color. He documented physical reactions people had when viewing the paintings up close. Cold sweats, nausea, memory loss, but also moments of ecstasy, as if the works let some access something else. He called the paintings reverse mirrors. They showed what the world tried to hide. The book was banned. The professor lost his job. A month later, he was found dead, drowned in red paint. One night, a homeless man claimed he slept beside a painting left in the town square. In the morning, his beard was white, his eyes sunken, his right arm paralyzed. He said he dreamed of an endless staircase made of bones. At the top, Matteo waited, painting, but the canvas was him, and with each brushstroke the man felt physical pain. When he awoke, his body bore strange marks, as if painted from the inside out. Some say the paintings weren't seen, they saw, that each one watched whoever looked at it, that if you stared too long, you began to hear things, footsteps, heartbeats, whispers, all repeating the same question in different voices. Do you remember? A man who stared at a painting for hours came out saying he saw his own death, described it in detail. Days later, he died that exact way. A group of teens once dared each other to enter Matteo's house and film the paintings. 3 went in, only 1 came back, no camera. He said the house was alive, breathing, laughing, and the paintings watched them. They knew our names. The 2nd teen vanished. The 3rd was hospitalized, mute, only wrote 1 phrase. It wasn't art, it was entry. No one knows what happened inside. A traveling priest from the north tried to exorcise 1 painting stored in a warehouse. He prayed all night. By morning, he was asleep on the floor. The painting had changed. In place of the original image was an unknown demon, wearing the priest's face. And in the painting's background, Matteo, holding a brush. The priest vanished. The church never commented. The stories continue to this day. In nearby towns and distant countries, people dream of paintings they've never seen, wake up with red stains on their sheets, find artworks they didn't buy, all with the same style, the same hand, the same absence of signature. No one says his name, no one admits, but everyone knows. Matteo's legacy isn't in museums, it's in the walls that watch us when we're distracted, or when we start to remember. Over the decades, Matteo's story drifted from memory into research. In the 1980s, a university team from Guadalajara launched a quiet project to track, catalogue, and analyze any painting attributed to him. They found 7 hidden in basements, convents, and private collections. Some damaged, some nearly intact, but all shared one thing: a strange magnetic repulsion. Researchers reported dreams, nightmares, growing obsession, to quit before testing even began. The first test was with blacklight. Hoping to identify pigments, they instead uncovered hidden patterns, layers of invisible symbols, micro-writing, drawings only visible in specific spectrums. One repeated a spiral phrase: "He does not paint, he remembers." Another showed what looked like human fingerprints, dozens, overlapping in impossible directions, as if many hands had touched the canvas from the inside. Chemical analysis was even more unsettling. Labs confirmed the base pigment was human blood, not animal, and more. It contained cells that didn't behave normally. They didn't decay. They showed minimal activity, as if in suspended life. One technician muttered, "This is still alive." They tried to replicate the compound in lab conditions, failed. The mix resisted imitation, as if it could only be created under unearthly conditions. One painting underwent magnetic resonance imaging to study paint density. The machine malfunctioned. Audio interference emerged, whisper-like sounds. When amplified, they formed words, in Latin, in Nahuatl, and in an unknown tongue. 3 linguists were called. None could translate. One walked out whispering, "This language isn't for humans. It's to remember what shouldn't be remembered." AI was used to reconstruct blurred portraits. The system generated faces with human features, but with misplaced eyes, stitched mouths, double jaws. Instead of clarity, it deepened the horror, as if the attempt to understand had triggered something dormant. One engineer had a breakdown. In a delirious state, he muttered, "They don't want to be seen, they want to see." A European team tried a digital exhibit using 3D scans. No originals, just photos. Still, visitors at the preview reported physical symptoms: itching skin, high-pitched ringing, a metallic smell. One woman fainted before a blank screen. Upon waking, she spoke fluent Spanish, though she was French and had never studied it. She simply said, "He's still painting." The questions grew. How could something so old still pulse with power? Theories multiplied. Some said the paintings were ritual vessels, not art. Others believed Matteo discovered a transcendent material. One scientist claimed the blood came from genetically rare people, but no DNA matched any database. It was as if the blood had no known origin, as if it predated all lineage. An anonymous paper proposed the paintings worked like receivers, catching signals from unseen sources. They were tested in EM-shielded rooms. Still, they emitted ultra-low frequencies. Analysis showed patterns, a kind of map or a musical score. A musician turned them into sound. The result, a dissonant, dense melody. By the end of the recording, everyone was in tears, without knowing why. Faced with mounting anomalies, the project was shut down, officially due to budget. In truth, fear. Universities erased records. Researchers signed silence agreements, and the 7 works vanished. Some say they were sealed in concrete, others returned to where they came from, but some believe they simply went back to him, wherever he is. What science revealed brought no answers, only deeper questions. It proved that some things don't belong in this world, that some matter ignores physics, and that some memories should never be unearthed. Matteo's art was not meant to be understood. only feared. We always try to label the unexplainable. We call madness what we can't control, art what we don't understand but find beautiful, religion what scares us and demands belief. Matteo lived in all three realms, too mad to be a regular artist, too much of an artist to be a mere prophet, and too lucid to be simply mad. What drove him may not have belonged to him. Maybe it just moved through him. Many tried to understand him. Psychiatrists, priests, poets, scientists, all left with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: Matteo didn't seek recognition, nor wealth, nor an audience. He didn't create for the living. He created despite them, as if paying a debt to something older than the world, as if each painting was an installment in pigment and memory. Some say he heard voices, others that he was the voice of something larger. Some believe he wasn't the first, that others came before, in other times, with other names, all painters, musicians, sculptors, channels for a greater will, not men but instruments. And Matteo was the visible face of something faceless, something that needed to be remembered. The blood wasn't aesthetic, it was ritual. Blood as scripture, as seal, as contract. Maybe he made a pact, or maybe he was the pact, because some deals are not chosen, they're inherited. They live in bloodlines, in a mother's whisper before birth, in the stare of an ancestor who saw too much. Matteo may not have had a choice. Maybe he was the payment, but there was beauty too, terrible beauty, but beauty nonetheless. Some said the paintings brought unbearable sadness, but also deep peace, as if for the first time they saw what was always there, as if horror once revealed could set them free. Maybe Matteo wasn't just a messenger. Maybe he was a redeemer. Maybe he didn't paint to imprison, but to soothe, to hold what screams inside us all. We'll never know, because his art wasn't meant to be explained. It was meant to be felt or feared or avoided. It didn't ask for opinions, only space, to exist, to bleed, to survive. Each canvas held something beyond technique. It held surrender, pain, truth, and silence. A silence louder than any scream. If he was mad, he saw more than we do. If he was an artist, he painted the intangible. If he was a prophet, he served a nameless god, a god of flesh, memory, and forgetting. What moved Matteo might not have been inspiration, but hunger, a hunger that only color could feed, and only one color would do, the one that keeps us alive, and also damns us. Maybe the real question isn't what drove him, but why we were drawn to him, why his paintings still haunt us, why we dream in reds that don't exist, why we feel that he still watches us from a corner of the wall or from inside us. And if it's true that each painting is a prison, what does that make our obsession with them? Are we trying to free something, or are we the ones already trapped? Matteo didn't vanish. He spread, like a stain, like a memory, like a name you don't dare speak aloud. Some call it art, others madness, but a few whisper a third word, when no one's listening, calling. And if that's the case, if this is only the beginning of a calling, then sooner or later you too will be painted, even if you don't know it yet. If this story sent chills down your spine until the very last line, tell us where you're watching from. Leave a like and share it with someone who would love to uncover this mystery. But be careful. Some images don't want to be forgotten.